It was one of those afternoons in South Memphis when the sky just couldn't decide if it wanted to pour or just drizzle. Gray clouds hung low and the air smelled like wet pavement and old rain. A teenager, 17, lanky, with a hoodie pulled tight over his head, walked along the edge of the road, shoulders hunched against the damp chill. His sneakers were worn thin at the soles, and his backpack, stuffed with textbooks and a half-eaten peanut butter sandwich from lunch, bounced lightly with each step. He'd just finished his shift at the corner grocery store, stocking shelves, sweeping floors and bagging groceries for neighbors who knew him by name. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid for his bus pass and helped his mom cover the electric bill some months. He didn't complain. Complaining didn't fix anything. His granddad used to say, "Work speaks louder than worry," and he'd carried those words like a compass. Ever since the old man passed, as he turned onto a quieter stretch of road, just past the laundromat with the flickering neon sign, he spotted something unusual. A big, shiny SUV, the kind you usually only saw in car commercials or downtown near the fancy hotels, was pulled over on the shoulder. One of its tires was flat, sagging like a deflated balloon, and standing beside it, looking more frustrated than scared, was a man in a crisp dress shirt and slacks, fumbling with a jack that clearly wasn't cooperating. The teen slowed his pace. He knew this neighborhood. Outsiders didn't usually stop here unless they were lost or up to no good. But something about the way the man kept glancing at his phone, then at the tire, then back at the road, told him this wasn't trouble. Just someone out of their depth. He hesitated for a second. He was tired. His feet ached, and he still had algebra homework waiting at home. But then he remembered how his granddad used to help stranded drivers on the old highway near their house. No questions asked, no payment expected. A hand lent is a hand remembered, he'd say. So against the rain and his own exhaustion, the teen walked over. "Need some help with that?" he called out, voice steady despite the drumming rain. The man looked up, surprised. For a split second, his eyes flickered with something. Maybe suspicion, maybe relief. He wiped rain from his brow and nodded. "Yeah, I think I'm making it worse." The teen didn't smile, but his shoulders relaxed. "Mind if I take a look?" Without waiting for a full answer, he dropped his backpack under the SUV's rear bumper, keeping it dry, and knelt beside the flat. His fingers moved fast, practiced. He checked the jack placement, adjusted the lug wrench, and within minutes had the spare tire rolling into position. He'd changed dozens of tires in his granddad's garage over the years, on beat-up sedans, rusty pickups, even an old school bus his uncle drove. This luxury SUV was no different, really, just heavier. The man watched in silence, then finally spoke. "You've done this before?" "Yeah," the teen said simply, tightening the last lug nut. "My granddad taught me. Said every man should know how to fix what's broken." There was a pause. Rain tapped on the roof of the SUV like soft fingers. The man crouched down a little, studying the teen's face, not with pity but with something closer to curiosity. "What's your name?" he asked. The teen wiped his hands on his jeans. "Doesn't matter. Tire's fixed," but the man didn't let it go. "You live around here?" "Couple blocks that way." He nodded toward a row of modest brick houses with small front yards and chain-link fences. "You in school?" "Senior year. What do you want to do after?" The teen hesitated. Most people didn't ask that, not really. They asked if he was staying out of trouble or if he had a job. But this man sounded like he actually wanted to know. "Engineering," he said quietly. "If I can afford it." The man's eyes softened. "That's a good dream." "It's not just a dream," the teen replied, standing up. "It's a plan. I've got savings. Not much, but enough for applications. Gotta ace the SATs next month." The man stood too, brushing mud from his slacks. He looked at the teen, not as a kid from the wrong side of town, but as someone with fire in his chest and a future waiting to be claimed. "Can I give you a ride home?" he offered. "You're soaked." The teen glanced at the sky, then at his worn shoes filling with rainwater. He almost said no. Pride was a stubborn thing, but then he thought of his mom worrying if he came home late in this weather. "All right," he said. "Thanks." As they drove through the rain-slick streets, the man didn't bombard him with questions. They talked about school, about how hard it was to study after working all day, about how some teachers believed in you and others acted like you were already lost. The teen found himself opening up more than he expected, about wanting to design clean energy systems, about how he stayed up late watching free online lectures, about how college felt like a mountain he had to climb alone. The man listened. Really listened. Not like he was collecting a story to tell at a dinner party, but like he understood what it meant to climb that mountain with holes in your boots. When they pulled up to the teen's house, a small, well-kept place with a porch light flickering on, the man turned off the engine. "Thank you," he said. "Not just for the tire. For the talk." The teen nodded, already reaching for the door handle. "Anytime." But as he stepped out into the rain, the man called after him. "Hey, what's your school's name?" The teen told him. The man just smiled. "Good luck on those SAT," and with that, the SUV pulled away, its taillights disappearing into the gray afternoon. The teen stood there for a moment, water dripping from his hoodie, wondering if he'd ever see that man again. He didn't think much of it. Just another odd Tuesday, just another act of kindness like his granddad would have done. He had no idea that this rainy stop on a quiet road would be the first thread in a whole new chapter of his life. One he never saw coming, but one he'd earn every step of the way. The next morning, the sun came out like it had something to prove, bright, warm, and washing away all traces of the storm. The teen woke up early as usual, made a quick breakfast of toast and peanut butter for his little sister, and headed out to catch the bus. Life went on like it always did. School, homework, part-time shifts, and the quiet hum of responsibility that never really turned off. He didn't think much about the man in the SUV. It was just a small moment, one of those things you do without expecting anything back. But later that afternoon, as he walked home from school, backpack heavy, mind full of calculus problems, he saw something that made him stop in his tracks. A car was parked near the corner store. Not the same shiny SUV, but a plain dark sedan, and leaning against it, dressed in a simple button-down shirt and jeans, was the same man from the day before. The teen slowed down, unsure. Was this a coincidence? Did the guy get lost again? Or was he looking for him? The man spotted him right away. He straightened up, gave a small wave, not flashy, not overeager, and walked over with calm steps. "Hey," he said, voice low and steady. "Hope I'm not bothering you." The teen shook his head. "You okay? Car trouble again?" "No," the man smiled. "Actually, I came to see you." That caught him off guard. People didn't usually go out of their way to find him, unless it was his teacher calling about missing homework or his boss needing him to cover a shift. The man didn't waste time. "I looked up your school. Talked to a few folks who run a program for students interested in engineering and tech. They work with kids from neighborhoods like this, smart kids who just need a little support to get through the door." The teen blinked. "You did that for me?" "I did it because you earned it," the man said simply. "You didn't just help me change a tire. You showed me something: focus, skill, pride in your work. That matters more than any test score." He paused, then added, "I'd like to help you get into that program. They offer tutoring, SAT prep, even summer internships. All free. But they ask for commitment. You'd have to show up, do the work, believe in yourself even when it gets hard." The teen felt a knot in his chest. Not fear, but something deeper. Hope, maybe. But hope was dangerous. It made you dream too loud, and dreams could break easy. "What's the catch?" he asked, eyes narrowed slightly. "No catch," the man said, holding his gaze. "I'm not giving you money. I'm not promising you a job. I'm offering a chance. That's all." They stood there for a moment, the street quiet except for a distant ice cream truck jingle and the rustle of oak leaves overhead. The teen thought about his mom working late nights, about his little sister asking why their house didn't have Wi-Fi like her friends, about how he'd stayed up till 2 a.m. last week trying to understand physics with a cracked phone screen and spotty library internet. He took a breath. "All right, I'm in." The man didn't cheer or clap him on the back. He just nodded, like he'd expected nothing less. "Good. I'll set up a meeting with the program director. They'll reach out to your school counselor this week." Then, almost as an afterthought, he asked, "Is your mom home now? I'd like to meet her. Not to convince her, just to introduce myself. She should know who's stepping into your life." That surprised the teen more than anything. Most adults acted like kids didn't have families, like they floated through the world alone. But this man understood it wasn't just about him. It was about trust. Respect. His mom was home, folding laundry in the living room when they walked in. She looked up, wary at first, Strangers didn't usually show up at their door unless it was bill collectors or church volunteers. But the man didn't push. He stood near the doorway, polite, and explained everything slowly: who he was, what the program offered, and that he wouldn't be involved beyond making the introduction. "I'm not here to replace anyone," he told her gently. "Just to open a door someone else once opened for me." His mom studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded. "Thank you," she said, voice soft but firm. "But if this goes sideways, I'll find you." The man smiled. "Fair enough." After he left, the teen sat at the kitchen table, staring at his half-finished math worksheet. His mom came over, put a hand on his shoulder. "You sure about this?" she asked. "I don't know," he admitted. "But I know I can't keep doing the same thing and hoping for something different." She kissed the top of his head. "Then give it your all. And if it's real, it'll hold you up." Over the next few days, things moved fast. A woman from the nonprofit called. She sounded warm, no nonsense. They scheduled a meeting at the local library. When the teen showed up, she didn't treat him like a charity case. She asked about his goals, his strengths, his fears. She told him about other students in the program, kids from Memphis, Chicago, Houston, who'd gone on to engineering schools, tech startups, even NASA internships. They didn't have more than you, she said, just more support at the right time. He started attending Saturday sessions, small groups, hands-on projects, guest speakers who looked like him and came from places like his. For the first time, he didn't feel like he was shouting into the void. People were actually listening. And the man, he didn't hover. But every few weeks, a text would pop up on the teen's old phone. "How's the physics going?" Or "Don't forget to register for the practice set." Short, no pressure, just there. One evening, after a long study session, the teen sat on his porch watching fireflies blink in the dusk. He thought about how one rainy afternoon, one flat tire, had led to this. Tutors who believed in him, a mom who finally slept easier, and a future that didn't feel like a fantasy anymore. He didn't know what would happen next. But for the first time in a long time, he wasn't just surviving. He was building. And that made all the difference. Life doesn't change overnight, not really. Even when something good starts to happen, the days still feel the same at first. You still wake up to the same alarm, walk the same streets, carry the same weight. But little by little, things shift. Like water carving a path through stone, quiet and steady. After that first meeting with the nonprofit, the teen threw himself into the program. Saturdays were no longer for napping or hanging out at the park. They were for circuit boards, coding challenges, and mock college interviews. He'd show up early, stay late, ask questions even when his voice shook. The tutors didn't just teach him formulas, they taught him how to think like an engineer. Break big problems into small pieces, test, fail, try again. But it wasn't easy. Some nights after working his shift at the grocery store, he'd come home so tired his eyes burned. His little sister would be asleep on the couch, homework spread around her like confetti, and his mom would be at her second job cleaning offices downtown. He'd microwave leftovers, open his laptop, and force himself to focus while his body screamed for rest. His friends noticed the change. "You're acting different," one said during lunch break at school. "Like you think you're too good for us now." He didn't get mad. He just looked his friend in the eye and said, "I'm not leaving. I'm trying to come back with something to give." Still, doubt crept in. Was he really cut out for this? Did people like him belong in rooms full of kids who'd had tutors since middle school, who talked about summer programs in Boston or robotics camps in California like it was normal? He'd scroll through college brochures on his phone and feel like an imposter before he even applied. One afternoon, after bombing a practice SAT math section, he sat on the steps outside the library, head in his hands. That's when his phone buzzed. "Hey, heard you had a rough session today." Everyone hits a wall. What matters is what you do after. It was the man, again, not pushing, not judging, just reminding him he wasn't alone. The teen typed back, "Feels like I'm climbing a mountain with no map." A minute later, "Then draw your own map. One step at a time." That small exchange stayed with him. He went home, made a new study schedule, and asked his tutor for extra help on geometry. Slowly, his scores began to rise. His mom saw the change too. She started leaving notes in his lunchbox. "Proud of you. Keep going." Sometimes she'd stay up with him even though she was exhausted, just to keep him company while he studied. She didn't understand the equations, but she understood effort, and she knew her child was giving everything he had. Then came the summer program, an intensive engineering boot camp at a nearby university. It was free thanks to the nonprofit and a quiet donation from the man, though no one said that outright. The teen was nervous. It meant leaving his neighborhood for 3 weeks, living in a dorm, surrounded by kids who seemed to speak a different language, full of acronyms like AP, GPA, and Ivy League dreams. The first day, he almost turned around. Everyone had new laptops, noise-canceling headphones, matching backpacks. He had a second-hand notebook and a calculator held together with tape. But then a girl from Atlanta sat next to him in the intro session and whispered, "Don't let the fancy gear fool you. Half these folks can't wire a basic circuit." They became study partners. She taught him shortcuts for calculus. He showed her how to troubleshoot a motor using nothing but a multimeter and intuition. By week 2, he was leading a team project on solar-powered water purifiers, something he'd dreamed about since learning how many communities still lacked clean water. At the final showcase, professors and industry folks walked around asking questions. One engineer, a black woman with kind eyes and a NASA pin on her lanyard, stopped at his booth. "This design is smart," she said. "Practical. Who taught you to think like this?" "My granddad," he said. "And a lot of trial and error," she smiled. "Keep going. The world needs builders like you." When he got home, his mom hugged him so tight he couldn't breathe for a second. His little sister begged him to teach her how to make electricity from sunshine. Even his old boss at the grocery store gave him a rare grin and said, "Heard you're going to be building rockets soon." But the real test was still ahead: college applications. The program helped him craft his essays, not about being saved or overcoming odds, but about curiosity, community, and the quiet joy of fixing what's broken. He wrote about changing that tire in the rain, not as a heroic act, but as a moment that reminded him, skills matter. Kindness matters. Showing up matters. The man didn't write his essays or fill out forms for him, but he did something just as important: he showed up. He reviewed his personal statement and said, "This is honest. That's your power." He connected him with a retired admissions counselor who gave blunt, useful feedback. And when the teen panicked about application fees, the man quietly covered them, no fanfare, no strings. One evening, as fall turned to winter and the first frost kissed the windows, the teen sat at the kitchen table with a stack of envelopes, acceptance letters, not just 1, 3, and with them, scholarship offers that would cover most of his tuition. He didn't cry, but his hands shook as he showed his mom. She read each letter slowly, her eyes glistening. Then she looked at him and said, "Your granddad would be dancing in the clouds right now." He smiled. "Yeah, I think he is." What happened next wasn't magic. It was the result of one person seeing potential, another refusing to quit, and a whole network of support stepping in at just the right time. No handouts, just hands reaching out and hands reaching back, and as he packed his bags for college a few months later, he knew this wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning of a new kind of work, the kind that doesn't just lift you up but lifts others with you. College wasn't like the movies. There were no slow-motion walks across sunny quads with perfect hair and easy laughter. The first week felt like stepping onto another planet. Everything moved faster, talked smarter, and expected more. Lecture halls held hundreds of students. Professors tossed around terms like thermodynamics and algorithmic complexity, like they were common sense, and everyone seemed to already know the unspoken rules. The teen, now a freshman, sat in the back of his intro engineering class, notebook open, pen ready, heart pounding. He'd studied all summer, but it still felt like trying to drink from a fire hose. Around him, kids chatted about internships they'd done in high school, coding languages they'd mastered by age 14, summer programs at MIT. He stayed quiet. Not because he was shy, but because he didn't want to say the wrong thing and give himself away. As if someone might tap him on the shoulder and say, "Sorry, you don't belong here." He called his mom every Sunday. She never asked if he was struggling. She just said, "Eat something warm," or "Don't forget to rest your eyes." But he could hear the worry in her voice, the quiet hope that he was okay. Back home, people celebrated his acceptance like it was the finish line. But he knew better. This was just the starting block. The first real test came in October, a midterm in statics. a class that felt like trying to balance invisible forces in your head. He studied for days, redrew diagrams until his hand cramped, and still walked out of the exam room feeling like he'd missed something big. When the grades posted, his stomach dropped. A C-. Not failing, but not good enough, not when scholarships had GPA requirements. That night, he sat on the floor of his dorm room, back against the bed, staring at the ceiling. For the first time since arriving, he thought about going home. Not because he wanted to quit, but because the weight felt too heavy to carry alone. Then his phone buzzed. It was a text from the man. Simple, no drama. Heard midterms hit hard. You still standing? He typed back, barely. A minute later, good. Standing is enough for today. Tomorrow we figure out the next step. The next day, the man didn't show up on campus, didn't need to. Instead, he'd already reached out to the nonprofit, who connected the teen with an upperclassman tutor who'd been through the same program years ago. The tutor was a quiet guy with a thick accent and a knack for explaining complex ideas with everyday examples, like comparing stress in beams to how a soda can crumples when you step on it. They met twice a week in the engineering library, surrounded by whiteboards and half-empty coffee cups. Slowly, things started to click. The teen learned to ask questions in class even when his voice shook. He joined a study group, not the flashy one full of know-it-alls, but a small circle of students who admitted they were lost too. They helped each other, shared notes, stayed late solving problems under flickering fluorescent lights. His grades didn't skyrocket overnight, but they climbed, B, then B+. By the end of the semester, he aced his final project, a small-scale wind turbine made from recycled parts, and his professor wrote in the margin, practical, innovative, and deeply thoughtful. He showed the comment to his mom during their weekly call. She didn't say much. Just, that's my boy. But the biggest shift wasn't in his grades, it was in how he saw himself. He stopped thinking of himself as the kid who got lucky. He started seeing himself as someone who belonged. Not because someone gave him a seat, but because he'd earned it. One late night, one wrong answer, one stubborn try at a time. He also started giving back. When the nonprofit asked if he'd talk to high schoolers in the program, he said yes. He didn't tell them he was proof that dreams come true. He told them the truth. It's hard. You'll doubt yourself, but if you keep showing up even when you're tired, even when you feel like you don't fit, you'll surprise yourself. One Saturday, he drove back to his old neighborhood with a borrowed university van full of robotics kits. He set up a mini workshop in the community center, teaching a group of wide-eyed teens how to build simple sensors. One kid, maybe 14, looked up and said, "You really went to college just from fixing a tire?" He laughed. "Nah, I went to college because I never stopped working after that tire." Back on campus, he began to find his rhythm. He joined a student group focused on clean energy for underserved communities. They designed low-cost solar chargers for rural areas and presented their ideas at a national conference. For the first time, he wasn't just learning engineering, he was using it to solve real problems for real people. And through it all, the man stayed in the background, never taking credit, never stepping in unless asked. But his presence was like a steady hand on the shoulder, quiet, constant, reminding him he wasn't alone. By the end of his first year, the teen stood on the steps of the engineering building, backpack slung over one shoulder, looking out at the campus that once felt so foreign. It still wasn't perfect. He still missed home. He still had moments of doubt. But now, when those moments came, he didn't freeze. He reached out. He asked for help. He kept going, because he'd learned something deeper than equations or circuits. Real strength isn't about doing everything alone. It's about knowing when to accept a hand and when to offer one in return. And that lesson? That was worth more than any grade. Graduation day arrived with the sky so blue it looked painted. The campus buzzed with energy, families in their Sunday best, balloons tied to chairs, proud tears barely held back. The teen stood in line with his classmates, cap slightly crooked, gown rustling in the warm breeze. 4 years ago, he'd walked onto this campus with a duffel bag, a heart full of fear and a head full of questions. Now he held a degree in mechanical engineering, and something even heavier, purpose. He spotted his mom right away in the crowd. She wore a simple dress she'd saved for months to buy, her hair neatly braided, eyes shining like she'd already won the lottery. His little sister waved wildly, holding a handmade sign that read, "My big brother builds the future." He smiled. That sign said more than any diploma ever could. The ceremony moved slowly, speeches, applause, the rustle of programs. But when his name was called, time seemed to pause. As he walked across the stage, he didn't just see the dean handing him the diploma. He saw his granddad's hands teaching him how to hold a wrench. He saw rainy afternoons studying under streetlights when the power was out. He saw late-night calls with tutors, failed quizzes turned into lessons, and the quiet faith of people who believed in him before he fully believed in himself. After the ceremony, as families hugged and took photos, a familiar figure stood near the edge of the lawn. Not in the front row, not drawing attention, but there all the same. The man. He wore a plain suit, no tie, hands in his pockets. When their eyes met, he gave a small nod. No grand gesture, no speech, just pride, quiet and deep. Later, at the small gathering his mom hosted back home, fried chicken, sweet tea, neighbors spilling onto the porch, the teen was asked to say a few words. He hadn't planned anything, but standing there, surrounded by the people who'd carried him through every hard day, he spoke from the heart. "People keep calling this a success story," he began, voice steady but soft. "But it's not about one lucky break or one generous person. It's about access. It's about someone seeing you, not your zip code, not your shoes, not your past, but your potential. And then giving you the tools to prove it." He looked at his mom. "It's about moms working double shifts so their kids can dream bigger than they ever did." He glanced toward the street where the man stood, talking quietly with an old neighbor. "And it's about strangers who become allies not because they have to, but because they remember what it felt like to need a hand." He didn't mention the tire, not directly, but everyone in that yard knew the story. The one that started with a flat tire and ended with a future no one saw coming. A local reporter from the Memphis paper had heard about the graduation and showed up, hoping for a feel-good feature. After the speech, she pulled him aside. "So," she asked, notebook open, "was it the billionaire who changed your life?" He shook his head. "He didn't change my life." He opened a door. I walked through it, and I kept walking even when it hurt. The article ran a week later with the headline, "From South Memphis to Engineering Degree, One Step at a Time." It went viral in local circles. People shared it on church groups, school pages, even city council newsletters. But what mattered most wasn't the attention. It was the messages that started pouring in. Teens from his old high school slid into his DMs. "How did you stay focused?" Parents asked, "Is that program still accepting students?" Teachers wrote, "We have kids just like you. How can we help them?" He didn't ignore them. He replied to everyone, not with polished advice, but with truth. Start where you are. Use what you have. Ask for help. And never let anyone tell you your dreams are too big for your address. That summer, instead of chasing high-paying internships in Silicon Valley like many of his classmates, he stayed in Memphis. He partnered with the nonprofit that had helped him and launched a weekend workshop for high schoolers, hands-on engineering projects using cheap, everyday materials. They built water filters from plastic bottles, solar ovens from cardboard boxes, even simple robots from old toy parts. Kids showed up, not because it was cool, but because someone who looked like them, who came from where they came from, was saying, "You can do this too." One Saturday, a quiet boy with glasses and oil-stained fingers stayed behind after the session. "I want to be an engineer," he whispered like it was a secret. "But my counselor said I should be realistic." The teen knelt down to his level. "Realistic is what you make it. If you work hard, ask questions, and don't quit, you'll be the one defining what's possible." He remembered how that felt, the sting of being told to lower your sights. He wouldn't let another kid carry that weight. As summer turned to fall, he got job offers from major tech firms, clean energy startups, even a research lab overseas. But he chose a smaller company based right in Tennessee, one focused on bringing affordable renewable energy to rural and underserved communities. It paid less, but it meant he could stay close to home, keep running the workshops, and design solutions for people who reminded him of his own family. On his last night before moving into his new apartment near the office, he sat on his old porch with his mom. Fireflies blinked in the yard, the same yard where he'd once done homework by porch light. "You did it," she said, voice thick. "No," he replied, looking at her. We did it. And in that moment he knew this wasn't the end of the journey. It was the point where he stopped climbing for himself and started building ladders for others. Because real success isn't measured in degrees or dollars. It's measured in how many hands you pull up after you've reached the top. And he was just getting started. Life after college wasn't about fancy offices or corner suites. It was about early mornings, tight budgets, and the kind of work that didn't make headlines, but changed lives in quiet, real ways. The young engineer settled into his new role at a small clean energy startup based in Nashville, but his heart never left Memphis. Every other weekend he'd drive back home not to visit, but to build. He'd seen too many programs come and go, well-meaning outsiders dropping in with big promises, handing out laptops or scholarships, then vanishing when the cameras left. He didn't want that. He wanted something that stayed. Something rooted in the community, run by the community. So, with a few like-minded friends from college and a handful of teachers who remembered him from high school, he started something simple. A Saturday mentorship circle. No fancy name, no press releases. Just a rented room at the local community center. A whiteboard, some donated laptops, and a promise. If you show up, we'll help you get where you're trying to go. At first, only 5 or 6 students came, mostly juniors and seniors from his old high school, skeptical but curious. He didn't talk down to them. He didn't pretend college was easy or that success came from just working hard. He told them the truth. It's messy. You'll fail. You'll doubt yourself. But if you keep going, you'll find your people and your path. He taught them how to fill out college applications without panic, how to write essays that sounded like them and not a robot, how to find scholarships that didn't ask for money up front. But more than that, he connected them with real opportunities. Internships at local engineering firms, coding boot camps with sliding scale fees, even virtual lab tours with university professors who made time because they believed in the mission. One student, a quiet girl who fixed her family's washing machine with YouTube and spare parts, didn't think college was for her. "I'm not smart like you," she said one Saturday, eyes downcast. He leaned forward. "You took apart a broken machine, figured out what was wrong, and made it work again. That's not just smart, that's engineering. You just didn't have a name for it yet." By the end of the year, she'd applied to 3 engineering programs and got into 2 with scholarships. Word spread. Not through ads, but through hallway whispers, church announcements, and parents telling other parents, "That kid from Oak Street? He's helping ours get into college." The group grew. Soon they needed more space. That's when the man, the one from the rainy afternoon years ago, stepped in again. Not with a grand donation, but with a quiet offer. "I'll fund the first year of a real program, rent, supplies, even a part-time coordinator if you lead it." The young engineer didn't say yes right away. He thought about it for days. He didn't want this to become his project. He wanted it to belong to the neighborhood. So he gathered a small team, 2 retired teachers, a local electrician who'd mentored him as a teen, and a college counselor from a nearby school. Together, they designed a program that wasn't just about getting into college, but about building confidence, critical thinking, and community pride. They called it Pathways, not because it promised a straight road, but because every journey starts with a single step, and someone willing to walk beside you. The man kept his word. He sent the funds directly to the nonprofit that managed the space with one condition: the young engineer had to be the director. Not a figurehead, but the real leader, making decisions, hiring mentors, shaping the vision. It was terrifying. Leading a team, managing a budget, answering to parents and students who trusted him. It was a different kind of pressure than acing an exam. There were nights he stayed up rewriting lesson plans, mornings he doubted if he was doing enough. But then he'd walk into the center and see a group of teens huddled around a 3D printer, arguing over gear ratios, or a shy freshman practicing her college interview with a volunteer. And he'd remember why he started this. The program didn't just help students get into school. It helped them believe they belonged there. One boy, who'd been told he was more athlete than scholar, discovered a love for biomechanics after building a prosthetic hand in a workshop. He's now studying biomedical engineering on a full ride. Another girl, raised by her grandmother after her parents passed, thought she'd have to skip college to help at home. The program connected her with a local scholarship that covered not just tuition, but books and housing. Her grandmother cried when she got the letter. The young engineer made sure every success was shared, not as a rags to riches story, but as proof that potential is everywhere. It just needs space, support, and someone who refuses to look away. He also made a rule. Every student who got into college had to come back and mentor at least one younger student. This isn't charity, he'd say. It's a chain. You pull the next person up and they pull the next. That's how we grow. And slowly the chain grew stronger. Local businesses started offering summer internships. A community college partnered to provide free SAT prep. Even the city council took notice, inviting the team to speak about youth engagement. Through it all, the man stayed in the background, attending a few events, always sitting in the back, never taking credit. Once, after a big fundraiser, he pulled the young engineer aside. "You've built something real," he said simply. "I had help," came the reply. "You had heart," the man corrected, "and you gave others the chance to find theirs." As the program entered its second year, enrollment doubled. They added coding classes, financial literacy workshops, even a parent night where moms and dads learned how to support their kids through the college process, even if they'd never been to college themselves. And every Saturday, without fail, the young engineer was there, not as a hero, but as a guide, a reminder that where you start doesn't decide where you finish, and that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is not just climb out, but reach back. 5 years had passed since that rainy afternoon on the side of the road. The young engineer was no longer so young. He'd grown into his role not with titles, but with quiet confidence. He still lived modestly, still drove a used car, still showed up at the community center every Saturday without fail. But something had shifted. People didn't just see him as that kid who made it. They saw him as someone who was building something that lasted. Then one Tuesday morning, his phone rang. It was the man, the same voice, calm and familiar but carrying a new kind of weight. "I've got an idea," he said, "and I want you to lead it." The man explained that his company was launching a youth innovation lab, a space where teens from underserved communities could learn real-world tech skills, robotics, renewable energy design, app development, even basic entrepreneurship, not just theory, but hands-on work with mentors, tools, and real projects that solved problems in their own neighborhoods. "It'll be in Memphis," the man added, "right where it's needed most." The young engineer listened, heart pounding. This was bigger than anything he'd done before. A full lab with equipment, staff, funding. It could change everything for hundreds of kids. But he didn't say yes right away. "Who gets to decide what's taught?" he asked. "Who hires the mentors? Who picks which students get in?" There was a pause on the other end. Then, "I was hoping you'd ask that." The man had learned over the years. He wasn't coming in as a savior with a blueprint. He was coming as a partner, with resources, yes, but with respect. "I'll fund it," he said, "but you design it. You run it. You hire from the community. You decide what success looks like, not me, not some corporate board." That changed everything. Over the next few months they met often, not in boardrooms, but in diners and coffee shops, sketching ideas on napkins. The young engineer brought in teachers, local tradespeople, former students from his mentorship program, even a retired engineer who'd once worked at the old Ford plant. Together they built a vision, not a shiny tech showroom, but a working space where kids could tinker, fail, rebuild, and create things that mattered, like solar-powered phone chargers for power outages, or air quality sensors for neighborhoods near factories. They insisted the lab be located in a part of the city that had been overlooked for decades. Not downtown, not near the new developments, but right in the heart of a neighborhood where opportunity rarely knocked. When the city approved the building, a former auto repair shop with high ceilings and big windows, the team got to work. Volunteers painted walls, local welders donated metal frames for workbenches, and a group of high school students helped install the first 3D printers. The young engineer made sure every decision came from the ground up. Even the name, The Forge, was chosen by the students. "Because that's what we do here," one said. "We shape ourselves in the fire." Opening day arrived on a warm Saturday in spring. The street was lined with cars. Families spilled onto the sidewalk, kids wide-eyed at the rows of tools, computers, and half-built robots on display. There were no speeches from politicians, no ribbon cutting with oversized scissors. Just a simple welcome from the young engineer. standing in front of the garage-style door that now read, "The Forge. Build. Learn. Belong." "We didn't build this for you," he told the crowd. "We built it with you, and it's yours to grow." Inside, teens tried their hand at coding a mini-drone, while others tested a water filtration system they designed for a nearby community garden. In the corner, a group of girls worked on an app that would help seniors find free rides to medical appointments. Every project had a purpose. Every student had a voice. The man stood near the back, arms crossed, watching. He didn't take photos, didn't post anything online. He just watched a boy who looked a lot like the teen he'd met years ago carefully solder a circuit board, tongue poking out in concentration. Later, as the crowd thinned and volunteers cleaned up, the two of them stood outside under the fading sun. "You did it," the man said softly. "No," the young engineer replied, looking at the open door where laughter and the hum of machines spilled out. "We're just getting started." And in that moment, the roles had shifted, not in power, but in partnership. The man was no longer the giver, the teen no longer the receiver. They were co-builders of something bigger than either of them, a place where potential wasn't just recognized, but nurtured, tested, and set free. From that day on, the Forge became more than a lab. It became a hub, a second home, a launch pad. Kids who once thought college wasn't for them were now applying to engineering schools. Others chose trade certifications, startup paths, or community tech roles, whatever fit their dreams. And every time a new student walked in nervous and unsure, someone who'd been there before would say, "Don't worry, you belong here." Because now they had proof. Not from a billionaire's check, not from a viral story, but from their own hands, their own minds, and a space that said, "You matter. Build something true." Years passed, and the story that began with a flat tire on a rainy road became something far bigger than anyone could have guessed. But if you asked the man who'd once changed that tire, he'd tell you it was never about luck or fate. It was about what happens when one person sees another not as a problem to fix, but as a person worth believing in, and then sticks around long enough to help them believe in themselves. Now in his early 30s, the young engineer had become a quiet force in his city. He wasn't on magazine covers or giving TED Talks, but his work spoke in the hum of solar panels on rooftops in North Memphis, in the confident voices of teens presenting clean water designs at city council meetings, and in the growing number of local students walking across college stages with engineering degrees in hand. He still told the tire story, sometimes, usually when he spoke to new mentors or nervous high schoolers at the Forge. But he always made one thing clear. He didn't rescue me. He saw something in me I hadn't fully seen in myself yet, and instead of handing me a fish, he helped me learn how to build the boat. That distinction mattered, because real change doesn't come from one grand gesture. It comes from consistent support, honest conversations, and opportunities that are real, not just promises. It comes from someone showing up again and again, not to carry you, but to walk beside you. The man, the billionaire, had long since stepped back from day-to-day involvement. He still funded programs quietly, but he let the community lead. He'd visit the Forge every few months, always unannounced, always sitting in the back, watching kids teach each other how to code or troubleshoot a motor. He never took credit. In fact, he often said the biggest gift he'd received wasn't gratitude, it was perspective. Helping him reminded me why I started building things in the first place, he once admitted over coffee. Not for money, for meaning. Meanwhile, the engineer kept his focus local. He turned down offers to move to Silicon Valley or lead national initiatives. "My work is here," he'd say. "This is where the roots are." He helped launch a scholarship fund named after his granddad, partnered with trade schools to create apprenticeship pipelines, and even convinced the city to convert an abandoned lot into a youth-run urban farm, powered by solar energy built by students from the Forge. But perhaps his proudest moment came on a regular Tuesday afternoon, years after that first tire change. He was walking through the Forge when he saw a group of middle schoolers gathered around a workbench. One of them, a boy no older than 12, was carefully adjusting the blades on a small wind turbine he'd built from scrap metal and plastic bottles. "Why'd you make it spin that way?" another kid asked. "Because the wind here comes from the south," the boy replied without looking up. "My uncle says if you design for where you are, not where you wish you were, it actually works." The engineer smiled. That was the lesson he'd learned years ago, not just in engineering, but in life. Work with what you have, build for your people, stay grounded. Later that week, he got a call from a reporter who'd heard about the urban farm project.
People keep calling you a success story, she said.
What do you think made the difference? He thought for a moment. It wasn't one thing. It was a chain of people who refused to look away. My granddad taught me to fix things with my hands. My mom taught me to never quit. A stranger on the road gave me a chance when I needed it most. And then I realized my job wasn't just to climb out. It was to hold the ladder steady for the next person. He paused, then added, "Real legacy isn't about how high you go. It's about how many you lift with you." Back at home that evening, he sat on his porch, the same one where he'd studied under a flickering bulb years ago. The neighborhood hadn't changed much on the surface. Same brick houses, same oak trees, same sounds of kids playing basketball down the street. But something deeper had shifted. Hope wasn't just a feeling anymore, it was a practice, a habit. A network of hands reaching out, pulling each other forward. His phone buzzed. It was a message from a former student now studying environmental engineering in college. "We installed the water filters in the community center today. They're working perfectly. Thank you for showing us we could do this." He typed back. "You did the work. I just handed you the tools." And that, he realized, was the whole point. The story that started with a flat tire never really ended. It just kept growing, branching out into classrooms, labs, city meetings, and kitchen tables where parents now told their kids, "You can be an engineer." I've seen it happen right here. No one called it a miracle. It wasn't. It was simply what happens when kindness meets opportunity, when hard work meets support, and when one person's belief in another becomes the spark that lights a whole community. And as the sun set over the rooftops of South Memphis, the engineer knew this truth more than ever. The most powerful transformations don't happen in boardrooms or headlines. They happen in quiet moments, on rainy roads and borrowed library books, in Saturday workshops where a kid learns for the first time that their mind matters. That's where real change begins, and that's where it continues.